Hey, what's going on? Welcome back to the channel. This video is coming from a TikTok user by the name of Bailey Needs Coffee, and she's gonna talk about men, well, traditional men really don't, they really prefer to not have a woman that is ambitious or career driven. So without further ado, let's get into it.
According to one of my guy friends, and I want to know if this is true, and I don't know if all men believe this or the men that I want to date believe this or who believes in this, but according to one of my guy friends, he said the man that you want to date, which is a traditional man, is not going to be interested in you because you are so career driven. And for me, that kind of blew my mind because I was just like, well, why wouldn't the man that I want to date not want me to work? And he said, well, Bailey, the traditional man is going to want you to drop what you're doing, and he's going to want you to, nurture the family. He's going to want you to clean the house. He's going to want you to cook. He's going to want you to do this. And if you are working, you're not going to want to do all that. You're going to come home with an attitude. You're going to be exhausted. You're going to this, you're going to that. So you're not going to want to. I was like, no, I still would. He's like, no, you wouldn't.
Her friend, this male friend, what she's telling her is a fact. Most traditional men do want someone or woman who's at home, a housewife, someone who's taking care of the family. It seems like this guy that she's referring to or talking about is more, he's traditional in the sense of he wants the nuclear family, the nuclear household. You know, he goes out, does all the work, slays the dragon, make the money, or bring home the bacon, so to speak, while she's at home, caring for the house, the upkeep as far as like the inside, not the outside, because that's the man's job. But, take care of the house on the inside, making the house a home, making sure that your children are properly reared, educated as far as like home values, family views and values, so they can, produce functional, you know, aspiring young adults to become, productive people of society. With the woman and the father, they come together, the whole biblical way, God, man, woman, child, follow that value, you're going to produce, productive children of society. So she stays home, cooks, cleans, take care of the house. He comes home, protect her, guide her, of the house. That's what he's talking about. However, today's society and the way things are, especially the economy, unless you are born with means or you've gotten, you made your money early, you won't be able to have that traditional sense, because men are traditional, women are longer traditional because of how things are. Back in my day, Gen Xer, that's what men did. Especially around like the late '80s. More women are out in the workforce because of changes. Economy starting to grow. Things becoming more expensive. Going into the '90s, yeah, more so. But back then, though, especially my mother's era, going back to great grandmother, great great grandmother, that's what happened. Traditional family.
He's like, and plus, and if a guy is asking you, like, what your goals are, and you're talking about how you want to continue to go back to school and you want to do this and you want to do that, they're not hearing that you want to, they're not hearing that you want to nurture your family. And I was like, but I mean, I thought it was like a given that, hey, I'm a nurse. Of course, like I'm a nurturer and I'm going to take care of my family.
That's not how it works. Women are inherently nurturers. Obviously, that's the essence of being a woman, and essence of being a man is being a protector, provider. However, being a nurse doesn't mean you're a provider or a nurturer. You're doing a job. You're doing it because of that job. Women more likely, especially a stay-at-home mom, tend to focus more on the child because that is yours. You brought that into the world. You're going to be more focused and in tune with that. You know, and because of society, because of social media, because of technology, there are no longer modern women or modern men, or like traditional man and traditional woman, just because we have so much worldviews at the palm of our hand and so much knowledge corrupts us. So, the term used to be back in the day, you would never miss what you never had. Where my mother grew up, she was born in 55, up until before she had me, the age of what, in 78. Um, they wanted access to the world like we are now. So what my mama knew was where she grew up in her little community. That's what you know. You go to college, when they go away from the family, they go a little bit more because they're starting to see what the world, the outside world is like. You meet other people, you start getting their experiences, seeing what things are. That's how they met. But now you can do all that from the palm of your hand. And a lot of times these days, people are more corrupt in ways of thinking. Well, I could have this guy here, I could have this guy there, I could have this guy on the other side of the world. And that's why people aren't going to be traditional unless you grew up in strong church going or Christian values or Amish, where that is instilled from birth. You're never going to have a traditional man, a traditional woman anymore.
But in the meantime, while, we don't have kids, is it not attractive that I have a career going for me? Or
Another misconception that, men supposedly like women who have money, who have a career. No, that's not the case. Men typically don't care about your job. We don't care about how much money you have or how much money you make or what you can do. You know, that's a masculinity type of trait. We don't care about stuff like that. We have more traditional thinking. We may not do it ourselves, but what can you provide as far as for me? Can you provide me a family? Can you provide me a home to come to instead of a house? You know, can you make it livable? Can you make it friendly? Can you make it comforting? After spending 8 to whatever hours outside, dealing with BS, they come back home. Can I come home and be safe? Can I come home and be comfort? A place of peace. That's what men want. It's cool that you have that because some men they do. I'm not saying all, but some do prefer that. What can you both provide? Let's build something together. But then you end up having children later on in life, and depending on what stage of your life you have children, it may be possible, it may not be possible. So it's a double-edged sword. You wait too late, you not have what you want. You start too early, you can have what you want, and then you can get a career after that. Just because you're a stay-at-home mom or stay-at-home wife doesn't mean you can't have a career. You can focus it more in-house, internal. You know, because social media, people are able to do that these days. You could sell stuff online. You could open up shops. You could do print-on-demand type stuff. It's all different types of things you could do from the home. I also get that women don't want to be cooped up in the home all day. They want to get out, do stuff, explore. But it's a give and take. You just got to talk that over with your spouse.
I don't know. I thought that was so odd, and I've never heard that before. Because when someone asks me like, oh, like, what are your goals? Like, of course I'd love to be a mom. Of course I'd love to take care of my family, of course.
That's to me, that's not a goal. That's an ambition. That's just a thing to do. A goal is to I want to lose weight. For me, my way of thinking, I want to lose like 20 pounds in 2 3 months. I want to achieve my bachelor's degree or doctorate degree within a certain amount of years. To me, that's a goal. As far as something physical life, family oriented, that's I would say that's more of an aspiration or something more than a goal because that's life altering. Because you see a lot of people out here with all these goals to get degrees and but where are they? Some of them don't make it. Some of them out on the streets. I see them every day. In Seattle, homeless. They be doctors, lawyers, people who've lost it, who've broke under the mental strain of day to day life, and now they're out on the streets. So I'm not saying it can happen to people with families, but 9 times out of 10, you're going to see a lot of that as far as between goals and ambitions and aspirations.
But aren't they asking me like what my current goals are?
Guys don't care about
Like, I
that.
didn't know they were talking about like the future.
Well, yeah,
I'm talking about like
the here and now.
right now.
See, that's the thing. A lot of women, specifically modern women, that's how they focus on the here and now. Get that bag, to get this car, to get this status, to get this social media like. Men tend to focus on more because we know we we want to have a family. We're more family oriented. I'm not saying that women aren't family oriented, but men, they want to be able to see their kid. They want to be able to, raise a family, produce, spread. You know, women. There are some women, but women, they focus on the here and now just because of social media. Back in the day, prior to this technology, women were focused on the long term. They want to have the family, to see it grow, to have grandchildren, to have great grandchildren. As the feminist era, feminism, turned on its dime, it changed a lot of this stuff, especially because of the war. When women started going out in the workforce more, just because the men are going off to war, to win the war, women came into the workforce, and a lot of that changed. And I wouldn't say warped, but it made some things better, and then it made some things worse. Because these day and age, women aren't really focused on having a family; they focus on a career, as you could obviously see. She is one of many that are making videos about this.
Like I'm talking about how I want to like be the best nurse, and I want to be able to take care of people like efficiently and quickly, and I want to be able to be the like person that people turn to
Things guys don't care about.
and know that like I'm that person that is going to get it done and I'm going to take care of them. Is that not also saying like that I'm a nurturer?
No,
That of course I would take care of my family?
that's not the case.
I don't know. That kind of like threw me because he was saying, well, Bailey, when you get pregnant and you have kids, like,
You're not gonna have
why
time for
would you
that.
try to work? I'm like, well, I want to maintain my skills. Like, I worked so hard to get here. And of course, my family would be my number one priority, but
It's not. You say I worked so hard to get here. She's focused on the here and the now, the her career. She's definitely a career driven woman. Having a family is an afterthought. She's like how women. I can always have children later. They want to get their degrees. They want to get into the job force immediately. Versus more traditional women, they want to graduate high school, have a family, and then as their kids become your age, like between 6 to 10, they're more independent. That's when the woman normally goes back into the career field. They start doing other stuff like hobbies, gardening, bake sales and stuff like that. Back in the day, I'm talking about these day and age. They don't do that. She's got it warped. She's focused on herself first, and then get somebody. But doing that, she becomes in a way more masculine because she wants to go out there. She wants to be a go getter. She wants to be ambitious. Those are mostly men's traits, and it's going to be harder for her to find somebody later on, which is why she's doing this video because she's single right now. So she gets all these skills. She's out there being a go getter, and then she wants to focus on the family. Depending on what time, after the age of 35, which is considered, uh, the I forgot the geriatric pregnancy. My bad. Um, that's when they want to start having children, which becomes harder. And then by that time, men are starting to focus on younger women. So as she goes up, men goes down as far as like what they want to get, as far as what they prefer. Younger women, less bodies, so to speak. Or women go up, they want men that's on their same standard, and which is why they're having a hard time finding somebody.
like, what about when all the kids are out of the nest? Like, what am I going to do then?
That's when you use your
Like,
skills.
for me, it gives me purpose as a nurse to take care of others. Like, I love that. I love doing what I do. Yeah, it's stressful, but gosh, I love it. Like, does the type of man I want really not want me doing that? Like, that's what I thought was so weird. Like, guys, is this true? Woman, have you been told this before? Like, is this your experience? Because that threw me for, I don't even know the saying, but that threw me off.
The saying is threw you for a loop. However, what women find important versus what guys find important, two totally different things. See, the thing is, we have this social media, we have technology where we all put our own videos out there, but her videos most likely will be seen by particularly mostly women, and the men's videos will mostly be seen by particularly men. So we're never actually meshing together. We're coming and going. We never actually seeing eye to eye. You know, one message being sent, one message being sent, it's never actually connecting. So until we actually sit down and start physically talking to one another, or you actually talk to male friends and actually listen, don't hear to respond. Actually listen what I have to say, let it sink in, process it, and then regurgitate. We're never gonna see eye to eye, which is why the whole man versus woman, man versus bear, this whole thing is all come about because we don't listen. We need to start listening like we used back in the old days, at the dinner table, nuclear family, talking amongst each other. We don't do that now. Now it's always text, a few words to be as efficient as possible, mixed messages, if you think of it that way.
Like, of course, I would love on my family. Of course, I would take care of my family. Of course, I would do everything it took to make sure that my family was comfortable, that food was on the table, that everything was clean, that everything was sanitary. But I guess me saying that I want to go back to school,
There's no
that
problem
I
with
want to
that.
give back to the community, that I want to do this, is that a turnoff to the man that I want?
It it's not a turnoff. It just shows the man your priorities compared to what his priorities are. See, like I said, you have to sit down and talk. What are your plans? High school, right? You get into college. What do you plan on doing? I want a family. I want this. I want that. And she says, I want to be goal oriented. I want to do this. I want to do that. And you're not seeing eye to eye. So, especially you see a lot with these higher professional people, people who are doctors, people who are lawyers. You know, they have children 9 times out of 10 later in life, and versus someone who has like a regular job, regular 9 to 5, they have tend to have children earlier, or they won't get a job. They just have children, and then they go into the career field right after. Like I said, between the ages of 5 and 10, that's when they start getting back into work field. But during that time that they're rearing the children, they're learning. They're in school. They're in night classes. When the husband come home from work, they go to school at night, get all these skills, or they do online courses so they can get their education up. So right when they come to the point where the children is more independent, that's when they start going back out to the work field, and that's where it becomes a more successful family because of the communication, because of the sacrifices. Versus, I want to do this first, and then I'll regroup later and hook up with you when the guy's already moved on to someone else.
Does that make them not hear that I'm going to be a great mom? I don't know. Like that totally threw me off. Like, is that just like his point of view, or is this really like the type of traditional man that I want's point of view?
If you speak to a lot of men, I would say, unless the modern men or men that are born like after me, after I would say 1985, moving up until now, you speak to men that are in their lower 20s, mid 20s, upper 20s, they're going to want somebody who's more modern. But men 85 and below in my era, they're more, they're going to see eye to eye as far as what her friend's talking about. They want somebody who's traditional, who's more home ethic, value as far as raising the family, being a nuclear family, and then get into the workforce later. Like I said, because that's how we were raised. We were raised to do that. We've taken on pretty much because my mother was a baby boomer, so we take on that era, that way of thinking. But as I got into high school era, sophomore, junior high, sophomore, junior, senior, that's when technology started coming about. So I grew up as it started to develop. Versus my children, my oldest is 25. He grew up in technology, so that's what they know. He's modern, different way of thinking versus me, more traditional. So we bump heads on a lot of things. He says, "Why is that?" I'm saying, "Why is this?" We, back and forth. But telling him how I feel, he understands. That's how we grew up. That's how we raised. More ways of thinking versus I want to hear the right now versus I can do it later. But when the here right now goes away, all you have to do is rely on what you had once do later. As far as you got to focus on that later right now, they're starting to freak out.
Because he was like saying it generalized. So that's what's like totally throwing me off. I have no idea. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Yeah. As far as the whole traditional thing, you know, traditional men, they want what they want. You know, there's no way of changing that just because, like I said, it's instilled in them at birth. They're raised that way through elementary, junior high, and high school. You know, that's how they are. You're never going to change that, you know, especially in the more religious Christian households. And like I say, with Amish, you know, upbringing, your culture, that's what they're going to want. You know, they will never mesh with somebody who's more modern. You know, they're going to mesh with somebody like same thing like, you know, with a conservative trying to hook up a liberal. You're never going to see eye to eye. That's why you see more conservatives staying together, more liberals staying together. It's the same way of thinking. You know, if you're going to be a modern woman, it's more likely you're going to be with a modern man because the ways you believe, you know, get the money first, get the money first, get the bag. We could think about the family later. Versus traditional, you know, okay, I'll stay home, I'll take care of the kids, I clean the house, my husband to be out there doing this, doing that. That's, you know, that's the ideal thing, but because modern society versus traditional, you know, way of thinking, it's never going to really be the case unless you grew up in money or you made a lot of money before you reached a certain age. But that's my thoughts. That's my comments on it. Let me know your thoughts and comments down below. Like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell. Do you think, you know, she's right as far as achieving the bag first, getting a career, and then selling with a family? Or do you believe, you know, have a family first, raise your children, get out the way, and then you can still go out there and get it? Let me know your thoughts. Like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell, give me a thumbs up. Catch you next video. Peace.